Sir Arthur Thomas Quiller-Couch was a Cornish writer who published using the pseudonym Q.Although, a prolific novelist. He is remembered mainly for the monumental publication The Oxford Book of English Verse 1250–1900 and for his literary criticism. He influenced many who never met him, including American writer Helene Hanff, author of 84, Charing Cross Road and its sequel, Q's Legacy. His Oxford Book of English Verse was a favourite of John Mortimer's fictional character Horace Rumpole. Quiller-Couch was born in the town of Bodmin, Cornwall, by the union of two ancient local families, the Quiller family and the Couch family, and was the third in a line of intellectuals from the Couch family. His younger sisters Florence Mabel and Lillian M. were also writers and folklorists. His father, Dr. Thomas Quiller-Couch, was a noted physician, folklorist and historian. He married Mary Ford and lived at 63 Fore Street, Bodmin, until his death in 1884. His grandfather, Jonathan Couch, was an eminent naturalist, also a physician, historian, classicist, apothecary, and illustrator. His son, Bevill Bryant Quiller-Couch, was a war hero and poet, whose romantic letters to his fiancée, the poet May Ware Burn Cannon, were published in Tears of War. He also had a daughter, Foy Felicia, to whom Kenneth Grahame inscribed a first edition of his The Wind in the Willows, attributing Quiller-Couch as the inspiration for the character. Bratty, he was educated at Newton Abbot Preparatory College, at Clifton College, and Trinity College, Oxford, and later became a lecturer there. After being granted his degree in 1886, he was for a brief time classical lecturer at Trinity. After some journalistic experience in London, mainly as a contributor to The Speaker, he settled in 1891 at Foy in Cornwall. In Cornwall he was an active political worker for the Liberal Party. He was knighted in 1910, and in 1928 was made a Bard of the Cornish Cultural Society Gorseth Kerno, adopting the bardic name Margetco. He was Commodore of the Royal Foy Yacht Club from 1911 until his death. Quiller-Couch died in May 1944 after being hit by a jeep near his home in Cornwall in the preceding March. He is buried in Fowey's Parish Church of St. Thimbarris. Literary and academic career. In 1887, while he was attending Oxford, he published Dead Man's Rock, a romance in the style of Robert Louis Stevenson's Treasure Island, and later Troy Town, a comic novel set in a fictionalized version of his hometown Foy and the Splendid Spur. Quiller-Couch was well known for his story, The Roll Call of the Reef, based on the wreck of HMS Primrose during 1809 on the Cornish coast. He published during 1896 a series of critical articles, Adventures in Criticism, and in 1898 he published a completion of Robert Louis Stevenson's unfinished novel, Street Ives. From his Oxford time he was known as a writer of excellent verse. With the exception of the parodies entitled Green Bays, his poetical work is contained in Poems and Ballads. In 1895 he published an anthology from the 16th and 17th century English lyricists, The Golden Pomp, followed in 1900 by the Oxford Book of English Verse, 1250–1900. Later editions of this extended the period of concern to 1918, and it remained the leading general anthology of English verse until Helen Gardner's new Oxford Book of English Verse appeared in 1972. In 1910 he published The Sleeping Beauty and Other Fairy Tales from the Old French. He was the author of a number of popular novels with Cornish settings. He was appointed King Edward VII Professor of English Literature at the University of Cambridge in 1912, and retained the chair for the rest of his life. Simultaneously he was elected to a Fellowship of Jesus College, which he held until his death. His inaugural lectures as the Professor of English Literature were published as the book on the Art of Writing. His rooms were on Staircase C, First Court, and known as the Cubicle. He supervised the beginnings of the English faculty there, an academic diplomat in a fractious community. He is sometimes regarded as the epitome of the school of English literary criticism, later overthrown by F.R. Leavis. Alistair Cooke was a notable student of Quiller-Couch, and Nick Clark's semi-official biography of Cooke features Quiller-Couch prominently, noting that he was regarded by the Cambridge establishment as rather eccentric, even by the university's standards. Quiller-Couch was a noted literary critic, publishing editions of some of Shakespeare's plays and several critical works, including studies in literature and on the art of reading. He edited a companion to his verse anthology, The Oxford Book of English Prose, which was published in 1923. He left his autobiography, Memories and Opinions, unfinished. It was nevertheless published in 1945. Legacy. His book of English verse is often quoted by John Mortimer's fictional character Horace Rumpole. Castle Door, a retelling of the Tristan and Isolde myth in modern circumstances, was left unfinished at Quiller-Couch's death and was completed many years later by Daphne du Maurier. As she read in the Sunday Telegraph on April 1962, she began the job with considerable trepidation. At the request of Quiller-Couch's daughter and in memory of happy evenings long ago when Q was host at Sunday Supper, he features as a main character, played by Leo McKern, in the 1992 BBC television feature The Last Romantics. The story focuses on his relationship with his protege, F.R. Leavis, and the students. His Cambridge inaugural lecture series, published as On the Art of Writing, is the source of the popular writer's adage, "Murder your darlings." He is mentioned briefly in The Well of Lost Plots by Jasper Fforde as one of the few authors with a name beginning with the letter Q. Works fiction Dead Man's Rock, Troy Town, The Splendid Spur, The Blue Pavilions, Iowa, and Other Tales. St. Ives, completing an unfinished novel by Robert Louis Stevenson. Noughts and Crosses, Stories, Studies and Sketches. The Ship of Stars, The Westcoats, Hetty Wesley, The Adventures of Harry Revel, Fort Amity, The Shining Ferry, The Mayor of Troy, Sir John Constantine, Poison Island, Trutilda. A collected edition of Q's fiction appeared as Tales and Romances. The Verse Green Bays, Poems and Ballads, Criticism and Anthologies. The Golden Pomp, a procession of English lyrics from Surrey to Shirley. Adventures in Criticism, Oxford Book of English Verse, 1250 to 1900, also online. From a Cornish Window, English Sonnets, The Sleeping Beauty and Other Fairy Tales from the Old French. The Oxford Book of Ballads, in powder and crinoline, Old Fairy Tales Retold, On the Art of Writing, Notes on Shakespeare's Workmanship, Studies in Literature First Series and Second Series, On the Art of Reading, The Oxford Book of Victorian Verse, Oxford Book of English Prose, Autobiography, Memories and Opinions.